This, for one thing, about me and my vlog is I was kind of a movie buff. So I was a theater patron. I loved to go to the movie house, and movies that would excite me were like Oliver Stone's JFK, Born on the 4th of July, Platoon. So I was growing up in the early 90s. So Oliver Stone was kind of almost in a way like in our high schools, right? And I went to the same exact high school as Taylor Sheridan, who wrote Hell or High Water, and he wrote Sicario with Benicio del Toro. He also did Yellowstone with Kevin Costner that recently closed. But he's probably one of our best screenplay writers today, when it comes to imagery, other than like David Lynch, But anyway, those kinds of movies, like Oliver Stone, also Natural Born Killers, were movies that were incited by the emotion of the 1960s. And we were in the 90s, 30 years later, or at least 25 years later. So in high school, I thought, you were supposed to protest and act out. And that seemed to be the right thing because that's what people were buying. If you went to a JFK movie, which was by Oliver Stone, or Natural Born Killers, or, Born on the 4th of July, protesting was what you're supposed to do. And I'm also a Protestant. So I was known to protest in high school, and I even got kicked out of a history class for saying some stuff about Vietnam. My history teacher, Mr. Moore, was actually a Vietnam vet, and he was my teacher. So he had made an announcement in class talking about the B-52s, which got my attention because I was a B-52 fan of the band B-52s, like Lobster, Red Lobster. And I heard him say B-52, so I started listening because I didn't always listen in class. And so I immediately raised my hand. I knew how to respond. And so the words I used were, I raised my hands first, and Mr. Moore saw my hand was rose. And I had jet black hair and a leather jacket, had my hair up like Elvis. And I wanted to be a rock star. So, whoops, sorry about that. Sorry I did not make your life convenient for that moment. That's not what I said, though. But what I said to him is I raised my hand, and he said, "Okay, Cole, do you have a question?" I said, "Yeah, I do have a question. Why are you talking about B-52s? I mean, didn't a lot of innocent people die because, of the B-52s or whatever?" Because he was saying, well, this is where the B-52s took off in the Philippines and bombed Vietnam and Cambodia. Which is like horrible murder, Like any particular reason why we're kind of talking about the B-52s taking off in the Philippines? He was just instructing the class on knowledge about the war because he was there. That's all I said, Is there any reason why? A lot of innocent people died, sir. And one of the girls laughed. I was trying to impress. So at the end of the class, he called me over. Everyone else had left. He said, "Cole, come here. What did you say?" And I was saying, well, I didn't understand why you were talking about the B-52s. A lot of innocent people died because of the bombing of Cambodia. So he grabbed me and he pushed me out of the classroom with full force. I went flying out in the hallway. I immediately went to the vice principal, who was a black man. Our vice principal was black. I was even paddled by him once. I think it was either him or another guy. I was paddled for being late. You could take a paddling, or you had to get a detention. Paddling was an easier way out, but that wasn't getting paddled at that moment. Also played Tom Jones. I was a lead in Tom Jones in one of the plays. But anyway, I talked to him. And I said, "Hey, listen, this teacher pushed me out of the classroom. I know I said some stuff, but I don't think they should have the right to, just shove you right out of the classroom like he did. I know he's a Vietnam vet, but give me a break, And he goes, "Hey, listen." He said, "Well, what was the thing?" And I was like, "Well, there's an anti-war protest coming up, and basically I just had to say I watch a lot of Oliver Stone movies, and Waze is talking over me right now, so it's going to click again." Basically, he knew that I was protesting. And he said, "Okay, listen, nobody's for war, right? yet we're always getting ourselves involved in war. It's gonna go. So he was trying to tell me, look, nobody. He was trying to tell me, he was saying, nobody is for war. I agree. Nobody is for war. But instead of kicking me out of the school, which would have been a stupid reason to kick me out of school, I ended up graduating from Pascal. He sent me over to a black history teacher who had some problems. He was older, he was retiring. He just wasn't the quickest guy, and he's probably not around anymore. But I ended up learning a lot from his class, not because he taught us to memorize all these dates and times in history. It wasn't because of that. It wasn't because of knowledge that made him a great teacher. It was because of what it was in his heart. So when I was brought into his classroom, I thought to myself, I might can pass this course, because I didn't think I could do very well in Mr. Moore's class, who was this Vietnam vet guy. And so the black history teacher, who's probably passed away now, he's older, he was limping, he was an old guy, he was on his way out retirement. Well, the first thing he did in class, when I entered into his classroom, was he brought a map over to me, and he said, Cole, can you point to where Vietnam is on the map? We had to look throughout the map and find Vietnam, and then point. And he was trying to show me how exactly far it was from the United States of America. It was very far away. And so I pointed. I said, oh, Vietnam is right there, you know. And that was like kind of how he tested some of his students. So he would work with you like hands-on. It was very different. Well, it was easy to pass this particular teacher's class. It was very easy. All you had to do was show up. The tests were fairly simple, and nothing was difficult at all. But he would say some wise things in life. Or he would say some wise things about life. Sometimes it would come out. My girlfriend at the time, who I was madly in love with, she was his assistant. So she would assist him. Like they had teacher's assistants. So he was, he had an assistant. So he was really nice, but he limped, and he had, he wasn't he was retired, and, she would tell me that he had, some problems, like he wasn't the, she worked for a lot of different teachers. She was an assistant teacher for a lot of people. And she was like, he's getting ready to retire, he's getting a little groggy, He just wasn't always the quickest guy around, But he was pretty quick. He's quick enough to teach history. So regardless of that, he did say something interesting that got my attention. He said that all we are in life are observers, which I thought was a very interesting thing to say. Adventures of Pascal will go on quite a bit. I would like to visit Pascal, but we had a female vice principal who had cancer. She had brain cancer. It was bad. She had it bad. And one time I was late. I think I've said this before in my vlogs, but I came to school and we had a auxiliary class. It's kind of a class you go to listen to the news, and then you go to your next class. It's kind of a roll class where they take roll and they make sure you're there. And I had come late, and I was very upset that I was late because I was in the drama. I was becoming a part of the drama room, or the theater room. I was becoming part of the theater. I was becoming a theater student, meaning I had to do well. So I couldn't mess up, and so I knew that there was something. I knew that I had to, be on time, okay? And I was upset that I was late. So I was kind of just walking through the hall with this, just scowl and anger, and I just wanted to get to Miss Kruger's class, who was an environmental teacher. She had some issues, too. She was like this hot swim instructor. But she was the environmental teacher, and I had her for the auxiliary class, and where you check in, the homeroom. Homeroom is what they called it. And I passed by the vice principal's black lady, and she saw that I was pretty upset, so she stopped me, and I had this leather jacket on. She walked over to me, and she said, "Listen, slow down, blah, blah, blah." She didn't say blah, 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 but she said, "Slow down." She said, "Listen, we're not your enemy." She was a pretty passionate lady. That was the only time I ever met her. She did make some announcements over the intercom, several announcements too. I didn't even know we had a black female vice principal. But it turned out months later, she paid off all her debts. She sold a bunch of stuff in her house. She also found, she got rid of everything and killed herself. These are so tricky every single time. It's just sporadic. It's all over the place. There's... 36. This is like
for favor.
Yeah, favor is supposed to be pretty good. I'm just looking for 37 and they're all spread out. Yeah. And we got it. Last possible one. Anyway, it was sad to hear that, that the vice principal, this black lady, offed herself. She killed herself because of cancer. They said because of the surgery, the doctors must have scared her horribly bad, that they thought that because of how bad it was, that she would not be the same person. So they had to cut out too much of it to save her life. And I don't know if she was having headaches or what the problem was, but she couldn't take it. And we got the news. It's bittersweet news. I don't remember any kids or any students that had killed themselves other than my friend Eric, who got drunk and ran his car off the road with a friend of mine, Stephen Wesley, who was killed in the accident. And Stephen was kind of a fighter. He was kind of a drunk, not headed in the right direction, really. But the guy that was driving the car was a drummer. was a real passionate guy, and he was also kind of a drinker. Not a big drinker, but enough to get tipsy, which is not good. One is always enough. Actually, none is the best, when it comes to drinking. I remember there was a kid that got shot trying to go to Taco Bell, but I never saw him, I never knew him. And then there was another punk friend that I had that was shot in the stomach by skinheads at a 7-Eleven using a payphone. But he would show people his wound and stuff. He survived it. I don't remember a lot of that until college. And that was when one of my girlfriends, Channing, I think I'm going the right way, was executed over $3,000. So she was killed, which I thought was meaningless at the time. It made me very mad at money and just, it was just $3,000. That's nothing, It was. Have you ever seen the movie Alpha Dog? It wasn't that kind of situation, but it kind of was in a way, If the movie Alpha Dog kind of gets into the whole craziness of drug running and killing people over it, But this had to do with the Crips. Those are the ones that killed her, and then it was like a bunch of other stuff. And I don't know. It would be hard. It's a Better Call Saul kind of thing, It's crazy. Okay, so you know how I always talk about these crazy movie ideas I get. I'm gonna switch over and tell you about one of my crazy movie ideas, so you don't have to look at me talking to you. You can look at the cool highway. Back there, I don't know, about maybe half a mile or so, there was a electric sign that said Silver Alert, and it gave a license plate. And I thought, I'm a big fan of Fred Armisen. I think Portlandia is really cool. And I thought it'd be cool to write a screenplay, or at least an idea, about this old guy that kind of goes senile, and his friends and stuff know about him, and maybe he was like a performer, like a comedian or something like that. And he had a really funny show like Portlandia. And it's kind of like a version of Fred Armisen, but the show is probably called like Organia or something. There's like a version of Portlandia. So I'm talking about Portlandia, but it's like a different name, like Organia, like Organia or something. Really, really stupid, right? And so he kind of loses it and starts like driving on the highway, just going like aimlessly nowhere. And he brings his cat with him in a cat carrier. And cat food and stuff, which is really not a good idea, to just go a long drive with your cat. But he starts doing this, and eventually he gets a Silver Alert. So, because he never returns, and they don't know where he went, and he's kind of lost. I like that idea. And he's just kind of wandering around. Like, think of About Schmidt, but like, let's say if Jack Nicholson didn't know where he was going, They wrote a song about it in the 90s. It was a really good song. I forgot the name of the song, but it was about this couple that gets on the road and they just drive and they don't know where they're going. Or Silver Alert, Here's a Silver Alert right here, though. You'll see it coming up. So the Silver Alert is for a black Ford SUV. Its license starts with an LD and then 2678. But I thought, it'd be interesting to do a movie about a Silver Alert case. Like, what actually happens, I think Amber Alert would be too stressful, Like, there was that movie, something called, like, Midnight Special. And it had Michael Shannon in it. But Fred Armisen is a very talented actor, very swift at comedy, very funny. And I think it'd be a good drama. Like him doing drama. You always want to see the comedian be dramatic, like Robin Williams taking those dramatic roles. I don't know, I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. And let's say Carrie, she has a rock band. They're called like Sleet Skinner or something. Sleet Skinner or something. I don't know the band's name, but anyway. They've got some pop rock band or whatever. But maybe she's in a rock band and she hears about it, and she's finally like, man, I'm sitting out, Silver Alert, He's out there on the road. This is ridiculous. He'd been back in a long time. He's on the road with his cat. The cat's all meowing. And it's funny, it's funny. You're laughing at it, like this guy's, driving around with his cat aimlessly. but it gets serious, you know. These screenplays, I first start like talking about them, and a lot of them I don't begin writing. If I begin writing dialogue and start putting the plot structure together, I've written a lot of screenplays. If I begin doing dialogue, then I start knowing the characters. But I always picture a movie star. I think a lot of the screenwriters do, because it gives you kind of a focus, and you know their language, you know, so it gives you the dialogue. Like I always did that. Very rarely do I ever think of like just some oddball looking character, you know. I have to picture like who is going to play this role, you know, who am I going to cast this character. And a lot of times, you know, even after I write it and I'm good to go, it doesn't matter after it's written, because the name, you know, is different. It's not going to be Fred Armiston. The character is going to have a name, you know. But I have this weird thing with fiction, you know, because you start to write fiction and there's something, it's like a demonic spirit that starts to argue that it cannot be fiction. And I don't know what I don't know if it's demonic or angelic, to be honest. But it's some kind of figure, because a lot of the things that we watch, even in Christian drama, you know, or any faith-based drama, or even like real drama or secular drama, you're always dealing with a lot of cases of narrative fiction. So it's a fiction character. But there's something that says, no, it has to be real. You have to use their real name. I'm like, no, you don't. And I had this argument with this like invisible demonic force. It's really that crazy. Tennessee Williams talked about this kind of stuff too. But like, it's an argument. And I'm like, no, it's fiction. I want it to be fiction. Like Peter Miller, for example, The Chosen One. I really like that story. I never crafted it into complete dialogue, but I do have dialogue in it. I've never put it on a typewriter. You know, I'm thinking about getting a typewriter here pretty soon. I like the idea of a typewriter, the sound of a typewriter. I miss those days of hearing the typewriter and knowing that when you make that sentence, you have to sit up straight and you have to focus, because if you mess it up and you don't have one of those eraser things, then it's printed and you got to go through with an ink pen and do the whole page over. It's very painful. It's different than a computer where it just fixes it for you and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't really write that, you know. With the typewriter, I used to have the typewriter that had an eraser. So it was a Smith Corona and you messed up a whole word. Like, what word is that? Then you'd hit the erase button, it'd go, it would erase what you typed. And then you would retype it. It always looked kind of funky. Man, I'm telling you, you have to really focus when you're typing. So you got to write it out for the sake of the typewriter. So, like, the guy that wrote Infinite Jest, he had a process. I liked his process. David Foster Wallace, right. So first he would write it down on a legal pad. You know, it would just like completely go down on a legal pad. And then he would write it again on another legal pad to make it ready for the typewriter. And then he would type that puppy out or put it in print. It was a threefold process to get it down right. And he was a dang good writer. Unfortunately, he hung himself though.